There are also fossae that are formed just naturally from these bones of the skull coming together. These are called cranial fossae. And if you'll recall, a fossa is going to be a shallow depression in a bone. And they're just going to be named after their position. One's in front, which will be the anterior cranial fossa. One will be in the middle, which is just middle cranial fossa. And then one in the back is going to be posterior cranial fossa. And they're going to be found on both sides. So as we take a look here, we can see all three fossa. So first off, we have our anterior, just this natural space that's created. The middle cranial fossa is found right here. And then the posterior cranial fossa is found right here at the back. And you can see there's one on each side there. Now looking at a sagittal view, we see those exact same fossa here. So we see our frontal bone and our frontal sinus right here. So here's our anterior cranial fossa, middle, and then posterior cranial fossa. We also have sutures that are found in the skull. Now, if you recall learning about joints, sutures are synarthritic joints, meaning they don't really move. And these where these bones come together and fuse. So the first one's called the sagittal suture, and it gets its name because it runs in the sagittal plane, and it's going to be located just between the two parietal bones. The coronal or frontal suture is going to be found between the frontal bone and both parietal bones. It gets its name coronal, meaning crown, as it's located about right where you would wear a crown on your head. The lambdoidal suture gets its name because it appears in the shape of the Greek letter lambda. And so what that is, it looks something like this right here. So this would be the sagittal suture right here. So when the lambdoidal suture comes around, it forms a lambda with the sagittal suture, hence its name lambdoidal, in the shape of a lambda. Now this is found between the occipital bone and the parietal bones. We also have the squamous suture, and if you recall from tissues, squamous meant flat, and so the squamous portion of the temporal bone is the flattened portion, and we'll talk about the temporal bone later on, but this suture is just going to surround that flat portion. So as we look at our picture, again, we have a good model with different colorations. So first off, our coronal sutures between our frontal bone and our parietal bone. So we can see half of it right there. And so I'll annotate that with a C for coronal. We can also see the squamous suture as it surrounds the squamous or flat portion, which is this part of the temporal bone here. We'll call that S. And then we can see part of the lambdoidal between the occipital bone and the parietal bone. Now looking from a superior view, we can see the other suture here. So just a reminder, here's our lambdoidal right there. You can see as it comes together with our next one, the sagittal suture, it creates that lambda-like appearance. So the one running between the two parietal bones, that is going to be the sagittal. And then we see the continuation of the coronal suture all the way across between the frontal bone and each parietal bone. Now we also have specific features that we have to find on the frontal bone as well. The first one is called the zygomatic process of the frontal bone. Now also, if you'll recall the terminology, a process is any bump or projection on a bone. So this is a bump that's heading towards the zygomatic bone, so the outside cheekbone, and it's a part of the frontal bone. So when you put all that information together, the correct terminology, the zygomatic process of the frontal bone. We also have the orbital process. This is going to form the roof of each eye orbit or eye socket. Also, we have a frontal bone sinus. So we will find multiple sinuses throughout the skull, and these are just air-filled chambers. There's one in the frontal bone, and when sometimes you're not feeling so great, you get some pressure in your forehead, and that's due to this structure right here.